Epilogue. What the mother left unspoken. Power that goes unacknowledged becomes violence. Power that is feared becomes control. Power that is understood becomes guardianship. It was a bright Friday, one of those days that deceive. Elspeth and her sisters, Cecily and Helena, walked through the doors of the First National Bank in Clearwater Bay with calm steps, and ruined 3 lives without raising their voices. Elroy Alpen's office was crowded. Too crowded for what everyone expected to be a simple signing. Graham Litton, Sloane's former accountant, occupied a chair with the confidence of someone who believes he has won. Beside him, his wife Paula watched the handbag as if it already belonged to her. Miles Cartwright, the loans officer, wore a professional smile, tense and forced. Elspeth wasted no time on pleasantries. She placed a folder on the desk. "Here are the documents for the loan my mother signed," she said. "Read the original copy filed in this bank." Cartwright was the first to react. "You've accessed private files. That's illegal." Elspeth barely turned her head, not looking at him. "Illegal?" she asked. "Did you hear that, Chief Calder?" Alpen raised a hand, commanding silence, and began to read. His brow furrowed. "And all other assets, including Elspeth MacRae's company." He lifted his eyes. "This wasn't in the original." The air shifted. Every gaze fell on Cartwright. "Now I remember," he said, straightening. "It was an oversight. After investigating, I discovered that Sloane MacRae was a partner in her daughter's company." That sentence was the crack. Sloane MacRae had never been a partner in her daughter's company. She had helped, advised, supported in silence, but never claimed a share that wasn't hers. The added line, clumsy, belated, written by another hand with another intention, was not an administrative oversight, it was a trap. By declaring Sloane a co-owner, Elspeth's company was included as collateral for the loan, exposed to a transfer she never authorized. Cartwright knew it. And the moment the office understood that this oversight could only exist after death, the lie was bare. "Who is this woman?" Paula interjected, impatient. "Elspeth MacRae," Calder replied. "Exactly." Paula tugged at her bag. "Graham, let's go." "Sit down," Calder ordered. Graham asked for the papers, his voice trembling. He adjusted his glasses. He recognized the handwriting. He recognized the mistake. His body betrayed him before his mouth. He coughed, shook his head, sent desperate glances at Cartwright. "Be quiet," his gestures pleaded. Cartwright didn't understand. Or didn't want to. "I informed Mrs. MacRae of the change," he declared. "I spoke to her on the phone. She came to the bank and signed." Elspeth felt something ancient and deep rise in her chest. It wasn't anger, it was memory. "You spoke to my mother?" she asked. "Yes, of course." "That must have been complicated," she said, her voice sharp and calm. "According to the date you recorded, you spoke to her 3 weeks after her death." The silence was absolute. "My mother was dying," Elspeth continued. "You knew it. She came to this bank seeking help to pay for her treatments. And you saw an opportunity. You connected her with them," she pointed at the Littons, "and thought no one would find out in time. You thought Elspeth would refinance the loan without reading it." Helena added. "Or that when she understood, it would already be too late." Cecily closed. "You should be ashamed. Our mother would never have put her daughter's company at risk." Elspeth stepped forward. "How many others have you done this to?" "Don't worry," Calder said. "I'll make sure to find out." Cartwright tried to protest. "If I lose my job over these accusations." "I doubt you'll keep any in prison," Calder cut him off. Paula sobbed. "Graham, take me home." "Not yet," the chief replied. "The prosecutor read the evidence this morning. I think he'll have some questions about conspiracy. Will you come with me?" Calder led them out of the bank. Elspeth didn't watch them leave. She hadn't sought revenge, only restitution. And for the first time since her mother's death, she felt that Sloane MacRae's legacy was safe. Elspeth signed the final document without feeling that she was closing a debt, but a circle. The loan had never been hers, nor was the guilt others tried to pass down. Sloane MacRae, her mother, had asked for help when her body no longer obeyed and disease was devouring time, not to save a company, but to sustain life one more day. Elspeth now knew with serene certainty that act had not been weakness but love. And the bank, with its figures and seals, had never understood the difference. Sloane had died quietly, as she had lived, leaving the essential intact. Elspeth, in contrast, remained there, forced to walk among the ruins of other people's decisions, gathering what others had twisted in the name of an inheritance they didn't understand. She was not the same woman. Sloane had protected, Elspeth had to choose. And by assuming the debt, Elspeth did not become her mother, but her continuator, not of fear nor silent sacrifice, but of the principle that united them, that true legacy is measured not in assets, but in what refuses to be corrupted. When the office fell silent, Elroy Alpen turned to Elspeth with a gravity that was almost reverent. "The bank will fully cooperate with Chief Calder," he said. "And we will agree to cancel your mother's loan with a new one, unsecured. Tomorrow, the documents will be ready." Elspeth nodded. She expressed her thanks, but she knew, with that intimate certainty that no longer left her, that she wasn't there for money, but for something far older. "On the contrary," Alpen added, "it is we who are grateful. We are honored that you chose this bank, under Theodore Whitlock's supervision, to safeguard the funds of your foundation." Outside, the air felt lighter. Cecily broke into laughter, unable to contain herself. "You took out a loan and gave away millions," she said. "You didn't touch the inheritance to pay for Mom's expenses." "She wouldn't have liked it," Elspeth replied softly. She realized as she said it, that her mother was still guiding her, even from absence. "And what am I supposed to do with some land in Scotland?" Cecily protested. "Go see it once you graduate," Elspeth answered. "Then decide." "And me?" Helena asked. "What do I do with my bonds?" She shrugged and smiled. "Whatever you do, we'll carry her name." They waited by the car while Helena searched for the keys. Cecily, ever alert to trivial matters, dropped the news. "Julian Fairborn is engaged. To a European, I think." "Poor woman," Helena murmured. "Hurry up," Elspeth urged. "Nathaniel is coming this afternoon." "And the wedding?" Cecily pressed. "Is there a date? Am I invited?" "No date. And yes, you're invited." "I always knew you'd end up marrying him." "Because you know so much about men," Helena teased, starting the engine. Elspeth smiled, but her attention had already shifted. As they reached the driveway, she saw him, Nathaniel, standing on the porch waiting. He had gotten up early to be there. That simple gesture carried more weight than any sum of money. In that moment, giving away millions or taking out a loan no longer mattered. Nathaniel raised his hand and smiled. Elspeth felt that everything, the past, the legacy, even the fear, had found its place. She had it all. Scotland, 6 months later. We think we choose between options, but almost always we only choose within the limits that feel familiar to us. True freedom begins when we see that there were more doors than we allowed ourselves to imagine. The MacRae Foundation had not been born to display generosity, but to correct an old imbalance. Elspeth did not want to turn the inheritance into charity or a monument. She conceived it as an instrument of restitution. Part of the capital went to medical research in her mother's name. Another, quieter portion, went to repairing damage caused by speculative practices that had ruined lives and entire communities. It was not always possible to return what had been lost, but it was possible to prevent the money from causing further harm. The foundation would be managed with the same rigor as her company, and Nathaniel, without completely leaving his profession, chose to stay to protect the life they were building together, not as retirement, but as a commitment. Where Callum's wealth had been a tool of domination, Sloane's would become an instrument of restitution. Some lands would return to the hands of those who should never have lost them. Other lives would find relief where there had once been only calculation. And in that staying, in that shared custodianship of order, memory and the future, Nathaniel and Elspeth found a different kind of permanence. The restaurant opened onto the cliff like a contained promise. The stone balustrade, old and sturdy, bore the weight of the north wind. Below, the sea struck with patience, not fury. Above, the Scottish sky unfolded in layers of grey and light, as if it too were learning to stay. Elspeth rested her elbows on the stone, the champagne glass untouched between her fingers. She did not need to drink yet. Nathaniel stood at her side, silent, respecting the space that was no longer distance. When he took her hand, it was gentle, as one recognizes something that does not entirely belong to them.
"There's a question I can't let go," he said, his voice low, almost absorbed by the wind.
"The same one since all this began." Elspeth did not turn. She was grateful she didn't have to. She listened better this way. Do we act from the wound, or from the custodianship? She closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her mother, of the company, of the money that had weighed like guilt, of the land returning to its rightful hands. She thought of him too, of the way he watched even when resting, of everything he had learned to survive. "For a long time I thought it was the same," she replied. "Defend, protect, control. It all came from fear." Nathaniel barely nodded. The sea continued, relentless. "I confuse strength with motion," he said. "With never staying still." He finally looked at her. "But the strength we inherit, it isn't for fleeing nor for possessing." Elspeth turned her hand and intertwined her fingers with his.
"It's for holding," she said.
"And deciding what we do with it." The wind passed between them, laden with salt and memory. Nathaniel raised his glass.
"Then let's toast," he said. "Not for what we leave behind."
Elspeth raised hers and the glasses touched gently. "But for what we choose to safeguard." They drank. And the landscape, vast and ancient, seemed to accept the pact without demanding witnesses. Scotland and the land. The wind descended from the hills like an ancient breath. The tall grass rippled in shades of dark green and silver, and below, among stone walls bowed by time, the land seemed to wait for a name to claim it without possessing it. Elspeth stopped. She planted her boot in the damp earth, as if wanting to feel its pulse. "Here there's no need to promise anything," she said.
"The land remembers on its own."
Nathaniel watched her in silence. He thought of how he had spent half his life chasing dangers that always slipped away a second before he reached them. This, however, remained. "Cecily says these plots were sold when they could no longer defend themselves," he remarked. "People left, but they did not forget." Elspeth nodded. She knew what it meant to give back without announcing it, to protect without imposing a new name.
"The foundation can buy them," she said. "Not to own them, but to return them.
Or to care for them until someone comes back. Not everything needs an owner." Nathaniel smiled faintly. Something settled inside him. It was not surrender, it was choice. "I've been offered a position," he said. "Training, coordination. Nothing about running toward the noise." He looked at her.
"It's not retirement.
It's staying." Elspeth understood immediately. For the first time, she did not feel that everything depended on her. "I'm not leaving either," she replied. "The company will continue, but not alone. The foundation will set limits. Audits clear rules." She took a deep breath. "I'll learn to let go without abandoning." Nathaniel stepped a little closer. He did not touch her. Between them, there was enough space for a lifetime. "Then we're not retiring," he said. "We're caring." Elspeth looked up at the hills, at that Scotland that was not origin but an echo. "Custody," she corrected. "The land, the money, the memory." And after a pause, "and us." The wind passed between them again, like an agreement sealed without witnesses. Nathaniel smiled sideways, with that quiet tenderness that needed no assertion.
"That last part is my specialty," he said softly.
Elspeth pressed her forehead to his chest, not to hide but to stay. She thought, without words, that for the first time love was not a force pushing her but a place to rest without surrendering. "Don't let go of me when I get impossible," she murmured.
"Not even if you order me," he replied, finally wrapping his arms around her. "That's what custodianship is for, not abandoning something when it weighs."
They stayed like that, while the landscape continued to breathe around them, as if the land had finally recognized those who came not to take it but to remain. The end. Author's note: there are stories that do not arise from the desire to tell something new, but from the need to face what is already there. Loving without fleeing was one of them. We live in a modern, fast, hyper-connected world, convinced that everything can be solved with efficiency, success, or control. Yet beneath that surface we still carry ancient questions. What do we do with what we inherit? How do we use the strength we are given? To whom do we belong when we stop running? This novel is not about heroes who triumph, nor about loves that save. It is about people who learn to stay. Elspeth inherits money, responsibility, and a guilt that is not entirely hers. For a long time she believes that possessing is protecting, that holding everything alone is a form of loyalty. Her journey is not about giving up, but about ordering, understanding that custodianship is different from control, that giving back is also a form of legacy. Nathaniel inherits another kind of weight, vigilance, risk, normalized violence. He has learned to move, to anticipate, to never stay in one place too long. For him, love does not mean conquering or promising, it means not fleeing when staying requires showing vulnerability. He does not abandon his vocation, he abandons the flight. The sisters inherit land, memory, roots. And they choose not to exploit them, not to turn them into symbols of power, but into spaces of restitution. Because some legacies only find meaning when returned to the communities that sustained them. At the heart of this story lies a simple and demanding conviction: love does not rescue us, it orders us. It forces us to face our hidden loyalties, our inherited fears, our learned ways of defending ourselves from the world. Healing, personally, familiarly, collectively, is not erasing the past or denying conflict. It is deactivating its mandate. Choosing consciously what we do with what we have received. Understanding that strength is not always shown by moving forward, and that sometimes the bravest act is to remain. I wanted to write a story where legacy is not measured in victories or possession, but in care. Where authority does not impose but supports. Where land, money, memory, and love are treated as what they are, living responsibilities. If anything runs through these pages, it is the idea that we all carry inside us a map larger than our own biography. We are individuals, yes, but also bearers of a greater memory, familial, cultural, human, that seeks new ways to express itself through us. When we choose consciously, something is reordered not only in our own lives but beyond them. Thank you for reading slowly. Thank you for staying. I deeply believe that stories are not invented, they are remembered. And that each reader completes this tale from the place where they have learned, or are learning, not to flee. With gratitude and care. Arhane. New series. Honor and Legacy. Honor and Legacy is a series of novels in which conflict ceases to be a choice, and becomes an inheritance. Here, honor is no longer debated, it is carried, passed on, transformed. The characters must confront what remains when everything else has burned away, the names that survive, the decisions that found lineages, the promises that are fulfilled or betrayed over time. Each story explores how legacy is not only blood or power, but memory, responsibility, and the invisible mark one life leaves on another. The past weighs heavily, but it also guides. Honor is no longer an individual trial, but a force that moves through generations and demands to be reinterpreted. It is a saga with a melancholic, noble atmosphere, where the intimacy of the characters intertwines with the pulse of history, and where loving, protecting, or renouncing defines not only the one who acts, but those who will come after. The focus is not on impulse but on the mark left behind. Not on the fire of the moment, but on the embers that continue to glow when everything seems to be over.